Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of History After Hours. My name is Kevin Pumphrey, and with me, like normal, is Mr. Ron Franklin and Mr. Jeremy Nixon. We are three history teachers at Lakeside High School in Hot Springs, Arkansas. We are recording this podcast on Wednesday, February 10th, 2021, and today we have a very special guest. Our guest today is the Assistant Superintendent from Lakeside School District, Mr. Bruce Orr, and he is here to talk about the COVID response from the administration point of view. Usually we hear a lot about what the teachers think, maybe what the parents think, of course what the students think, but I wanted to get a little bit of a take from the administration on how they responded starting all the way back to last year. So with that said, I hope you enjoy the podcast. Okay, welcome to another edition of History After Hours. This is a very special episode. We are recording this on Wednesday, February 10th, and our special guest today, former high school principal, assistant superintendent of Lakeside School District, and probably the most important thing was hiring us as
I'll say the man who hired us.
Mr. Bruce Orr, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here. I mean, I've yearned for this invitation for a long time. So
I know. We passed on you so many times, but finally
easy to do.
You wore us down. No, we wanted to get you on here because of your unique perspective as a school administrator. I'm positive you've heard of the teacher's experience during this, as many administrators have probably heard plenty.
What do you mean by that? I mean, how can, has anybody had any extra commentary outside of the normal range of commentary about this school year in particular? That
really hadn't heard much.
It seems odd to me. Yeah, I mean,
go back a couple podcasts.
I mean, I bet your email box is just wishing there would be an entry.
Absolutely.
Won't somebody contact me?
So we thought it would be good to get you in here to give us the administrative perspective, because I have actually got my principal's license. I went through some of the schooling, and you do get a very different look at a school. And of course, you're now at the district level. So if you can remember, because it seems like it's been about 20 years ago, but if you can go back to March of 2020 when all of this started kind of foaming to the top, and we looked like we were getting some information that, okay, well, maybe we have to shut down for a little while.
Hey, let's go back further than that, though. Like
okay.
When you first heard about COVID at all, like, can you remember?
Oh, yeah,
when
how
you were
you
like,
respond?
is this a thing that? I mean, can you recall that?
I do. I mean, I would have to color myself in one of the ones that did not believe that it was going to be near like this. I remember I think that Friday the 13th is what we're talking about. That was the last day at school, if I remember right. We actually went out, had dinner on Thursday the 12th with another couple. We talked about it. People are really making a big deal out of this. You think this is anything different than what we've seen? And then by the next day, like 24 hours later, we were having a whole different conversation. I will say I thought when we went home, I did not think it was going to be for, maybe a week till spring break, and we were going to be coming back. And, then, history took over, didn't it?
Yeah.
Looking back on the blissful ignorance of that moment, because I felt the same way. We didn't know. We'd never seen where this might go. There were inklings of, hey, it might be worse than what we might have experienced before, but nothing like this. I didn't expect that at all. And I really thought, even if we have to pivot for a while, even if we have a week or so or 2 weeks, maybe after we get back from spring break, there'll be enough distance between people. It'll all just kind of, I really kind of felt that maybe, I mean, you don't know, obviously, but at the same time, I was like, yeah, okay, sure, it'll wash out. That's kind of what I was thinking, right. Maybe. But then at what point did you kind of realize that, no?
Well, I mean, I would even say a lot during the spring. I still thought we were taking an overly cautious approach to it. I understood, you were hearing of, the mortality rate and how easily that it was transmitted. But I mean, still, I'm sure y'all were the same way. You're watching those Arkansas numbers. I mean, when the governor would come and talk to us every day, and you looked at the numbers, and you're like, golly, that's just not a lot of cases, to be doing that. So it was still kind of okay, we're being very cautious.
Maybe it's an East Coast, West Coast problem, not one of our problems here in the middle of the country.
I do remember thinking that Arkansas, we almost socially distanced by nature, that there's a good chance that, we're not going to be affected by that. Then I remember, as the numbers were starting to creep up and looking at the whole global thing, I guess that's when you really started looking at what was happening in China. I remember Italy, when I really started looking at what was happening in Italy. Okay, I mean, I could see where this could go, and thinking about how, then starting to think about, should we close our state off? Should we? I remember I was one thing, we need to block the roads. We need to quit letting these people in because they're bringing it to us. And, it's just been
Well, you actually are a part of me. When I think of my first, look, I am a typical one-track. You can ask my wife. I'm oblivious to a lot of stuff that's going on when I'm focused on something. And I was focused on getting ready for a trip to Spain. And I don't know if you remember this, but you sent me a text message. Hey, how about that trip to Spain? One weekend, I think it was on like a Saturday, You sent me a text. And then that made me think, wow, this thing is big. And then I started looking at the map, and it wasn't a few days later they shut my trip down because the Spain numbers were through the roof.
Right. Well, I do remember that, and I was serious thinking that's probably not going to happen, but I was thinking more of the fear factor than the actual reality of what's taking place. Because, I do. I mean, that's unfortunate in my position because I do kind of think the worst on things like that, especially school events. We almost have to. And that'll be some of what I'll talk about today. You do kind of have to plan for the worst when you're making some of the decisions. But I will say, when I said that, I did not really believe in my heart that it would be dangerous for you to go, but it was just that it probably would not happen in the climate of everything.
Yeah, and it shut us down not only for that year, but this year, of course, we got shut down again.
Well, even at that moment when you had that text conversation, like there weren't really numbers in Spain that would have, in my mind, have warranted canceling that trip. That only happened a little bit after the Italy things, and suddenly those numbers started to climb, and you were like, geez, I'm glad y'all didn't go.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of conversations with EF right after that, and it was that following week where it really started to explode in those two countries that were hit hard. And then, it really was a paradigm shift for me because now I'm thinking, oh, we're not going to Spain. This is the first time in 10 years I haven't taken a group somewhere around the world. And so my life is really affected by this. And then it wasn't. The next week, we're shutting down the whole school.
My life was really affected
because literally I thought, this is something that's happening in China and it's happening in Italy. It's not, we'll shake this thing off because I'm just so oblivious to what's going on.
It was on our minds though, and what I'll bring up too, and this talks to how astute our children are here at the high school. At the last podcast that we have, the last live one, it was like March 5th, and we're recording out, and the first question out of the gate was, what do you guys think about this COVID stuff? And we're like, well, it's on China and we're going to watch it and all that. And I remember, though, because I've gone back and listened to it after the fact, and we sat there and we were like, it has the potential to be different because, and I remember this clearly, too. Before I left the house that day to go to the live podcast, I remember CDC director on the TV saying, look, there could be disruptions. There could be supply disruptions. You might want to start preparing. And I was like, wow, I've never heard anybody come out and say something like that. And that rung a bell. And we talked about it. We actually talked about it that night.
Yeah, we talked about it on the podcast.
Yeah.
So, and then you were the one that started the toilet paper rush, weren't you?
It was him.
Ron had a garage. He had a garage full of toilet paper. He actually caused the Garland County problem.
Well, but I remember in February I bought masks and stuff because when I was reading the news just internationally, and part of that was because I was looking at, weirdly enough, AP Comparative Politics textbooks and looking for resources, and I'm reading some more stuff over online over in Europe, and I was like, and that's when I really first thought about it in February. But I was kind of like Kevin. I'm like,
I don't know if you were like me because it wasn't until mid-March before I even knew something was good. I'm going to be, I teach U.S. history, and, World War II was erupting. I would have been one of those Americans. That's not my problem. Let them go.
But out of a sense of fairness, though, it is so obviously unusual. Like the idea that where we are now compared to where we were a year ago, like it is absolutely night and day in how I approach life and how I travel and how the people I haven't seen, and that was I would have never have expected. And I know, we've probably said things like this 1,000 times by this point, but it's absolutely true. Like I would, even with the precautionary sort of bells going off in my head, I never thought it would have really, especially here in the middle of the country. Like maybe in the more condensed areas where the populations are higher, okay, you're going to have an issue. But to see it just continue to swamp and move like this, like this slow, it was like it was stalking us slowly over time. Yeah, it was very odd.
Well, 1 year ago, if you would have showed me a video of our hallway, 1 year ago, February 2020, if you'd have said, hey, here's a video of the hallway at Lakeside 1 year from today in February 2021, and everybody's in masks, and the classrooms are set up like this. I've got microphones hanging from the ceiling. What happened? I wouldn't even have been able to guess what what was going on. Do we have some sort of nuclear fallout? What's going on? So, I mean, I think none of us were probably prepared, except for Nixon. He's the smart one of the group. I'm buying masks in February. I don't know what y'all are doing. Y'all been watching the news?
Yeah, but I bought like one box. I mean,
That's true. This will be over by June.
Well, I'm still trying to figure out how to fold a bandana. Do we have bandanas? I don't even know.
So one thing I want you to kind of tell us, I know you probably can't say every little thing that occurred, but can you break down, like from your point of view, some of the conversations you were having with Mr. Cook, the superintendent, or some of the information you were getting from the governor or State Department?
Sure.
School board?
Just walk us through that process.
I mean, that's so relevant right now because, I mean, unfortunately, we're about to do this again. I mean, as far as we're about to try to develop a plan for next year because, right now there's no plan for students to be vaccinated probably by August. I mean, their vaccine is not even approved yet unless it's happened in the last few days that I'm unaware of. And then even if we do get the green light on that, you've seen the problems we're having just getting our different tiers of people through the vaccination process. So it was an article I read, I don't know, probably 3-4 weeks ago, and that was another one of those sobering moments. In my mind, I was thinking by August, we're going to be back in business. I mean, with any luck with the vaccine and everything, but I had not thought about the students are not going to be vaccinated. So we're still going to have families and parents who are probably not going to want to send their kids back to school. So, I'm kind of going back, and I really don't want to skip completely over the March to May time. I could do a whole, another show on that, just about how we, so many people came together and really we got a lot of recognition around the state for our response from that time. Because you talk about just having to drop everything, pivot, and start moving in a whole different direction. Like, our tech department reaching out, getting internet to students' homes, to getting devices, to our staff that were not used to. A lot of them did not use a lot of technology in their everyday.
What was that conversation like though? When you guys had the meeting, where you're like, "Here's what we're going to have to figure out."
Yeah.
Like, when did that occur in the?
Okay, Sunday. I remember, we went to school that Friday, and we told. I know I was really heavily involved down at the primary at that time, getting the kids, because it was a little more chaotic down there with little kids. Let's get the Chromebooks, let's get them home. And then I think it was that weekend where Governor Hutchinson, came out and said pretty much no school until, did he say it was off until spring break? Or, it was pretty soon. He called it off for the whole rest of the year. Maybe it was up till spring break, and then we came back after that. So, early on, we just decided that, we and that's one thing I love about Lakeside. I think we have high expectations. We didn't want our kids, to suffer educationally. And I think we came out of the gate like really hot, like really pressing. If you remember that, it was like we were trying to Zoom with them every minute of the day because we'd never done that before. And because thinking that would be the most, keep them in a routine and stuff like that. And then we were burning everybody out. So then we started trying to learn those where that balance was between, good instruction and not being on the screen 24/7. But, we wanted to try to finish not only, for that group of seniors, to finish them out strong. You'll remember that. We didn't let the seniors go towards the end. We caught some comments on that one. But, again, that's
But in that initial meeting, was there that moment where you guys were like, okay, this is real, and we have to get everybody on the same page?
Oh, yeah.
That happened fairly quickly, though, I assume.
Yes, Sunday afternoon. We met up there in the central office. Looking back, how silly that was. We all packed in the conference room. I mean, like 6 inches, 6 inches apart.
Right there. All right, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but still, at the time, I did not think it was going to be the rest of the semester at that point until.
Was the general mood in the room like, okay, what was there, that sense of urgency? Like, we better get this done because it might not happen? Because I know there were some districts who were like, well, okay, we'll do this, but then like it wasn't as coordinated. You guys seem to have taken it farther, faster. So how did you come to that decision?
I remember that day, one of the big things we were worried about was feeding kids. That was one of we talked a lot about how we were going to do our transportation, how we were going to get meals out to kids. That's always a big concern in a lot of our conversations is we think of the kids that even like we're sitting here today and we just called school for the next 2 days. That's always a consideration. There's kids that they depend on us for so much. They depend on us for food. They depend on us for love. This is still a very steady, stable part of a lot of our kids' lives. So I remember having a lot of conversations about how are we going to get meals to our kids. We're going to need to take care of those needs. And then we talked a lot about just expectations, that we wanted to make sure we were being consistent, across the board on that. Like, we weren't going to have some people say, we're going to go, 12 hours a day, and some people throw some worksheets or something.
Was there this sort of gradual dawning comprehension that this was the situation that we were facing, or was it just a snap, like, okay, flipped a switch?
It was a snap. It was like it really. I don't think it sank in at that point. It was just like, okay, they told us this is the deal, so we're gonna make the best we can with it until we hear the next deal. Mm-hmm. So I don't.
What about after the fact when you were like, okay, we're not coming back. We're not coming back. We're not coming back. I mean, did that gradually sink in too, or was that?
Again, I think it was probably a thing where I was thinking this is a cautious approach because I'm looking at Arkansas numbers. It's a cautious approach. I understand. We're going to make the best out of it, and then August. Hopefully this is going to pass by because we were hearing summer. Things. The numbers were going to go down. So I'm thinking, we'll be back.
Were there people in your sphere of influence, and I'm not talking about just here at school, that were thinking that we were being overly cautious, that this wasn't as bad as that some people were making it out to be worse than it was, that it was an exaggerated or that it was a hoax? I'm not suggesting that the school took it that way, but I mean just in your sphere of influence anywhere in your life.
Let me talk locally about that. There was a time that weekend right before Governor Hutchinson made the first announcement. There was I had a friend. He's a parent that has had kids go through our system, and he called me, and he's in the medical field, and he said, "You've got to shut school down right now." That was the Saturday before that. I guess that was the 14th, the morning of the 14th. He said, "You got to shut it down right now."
Wow.
And I was like, wait a minute. Now, I appreciate you think I'm so powerful that I can that I can shut down school, but I'm not, because by that point, the Department of Education already came out and said you're not going to shut down school. We will shut down school. You can't make that decision on your own. So, I listened to him, and I remember I called Mr. Cook, and I said, Mr. Cook, where I've been. We've been talking about it, but I just had somebody I really value their opinion. They just told me we need to shut down school. Mr. Cook said, "Hey, Bruce, we can't shut down school." That's you heard it just like I did. And I said, yeah,
legally you can't. Yeah.
Yeah, but so we talked about it, and he did reach out that weekend and just say, just pretty much pass on what we've got. Some of our local health providers that are very, very worried, and I think at that weekend, I think Governor Hutchinson got a lot of suggestions.
Okay, well,
from the public
that was my follow-up then.
Yep.
Based on that and some of the information you were getting, then you realized, especially with people who had medical knowledge, saying, look, was there pressure then on the state leadership to make more
I don't think there's any.
about?
I have no knowledge of of what actually happened, but
Well, yeah, that's
but
not what I meant. I mean,
I do think that there was a lot of phone calls made that weekend. It was probably very similar. I mean, if there were medical experts in our area that were saying that, I'm sure they were saying it across the state. So
I would assume that any good governmental leadership team would take
Right.
some commentary from the people who are in the system itself. You would hope that would be true.
Yeah. But that was kind of that weekend. I guess I did.
Well, let me talk about that week before spring break, because I left here so impressed at how much got done in that week before spring break, because we were already headed towards 1-to-1, and maybe technically we were already there to some degree, but Mr. Thornton sending out emails, getting Chromebooks to kids in our caps. I mean, we stopped school one day. We got everybody go to your caps. We're distributing Chromebooks. And then, I hear after spring break, I think that you guys made a deal with the local internet provider. Like, so much got done so quickly with so many moving parts. And now, of course, I can only speak to what happened here at the high school. How does that is that working at a school level? Is the high school just doing, or is it the central office that's given some direction there? Like, those little decisions about Chromebooks and identifying students that don't have internet. How do we get those kids internet? What happens when we don't? How do we mail them stuff? Like, there's a million questions.
There's a million moving parts to that story.
Yeah, and is the state helping out or anything like that?
Well, that's really a great story. I mean, we were working really well as a team. Like, we would meet every morning at 7:00 on Zoom, like our administrative or leadership team, and we would hash a lot of things out. But again, a lot of it was a plan that was really laid. The foundation was laid well before. Like, I really give a lot of credit to Mr. Thornton and our technology department. I mean, they were the ones that had really moved us to the Chromebooks, where we really had the devices, the right device to go home. Because Chromebooks, as far as doing what we're doing, is probably as good as you get. I mean, with laptops, there's a lot of issues with those that you don't necessarily have with Chromebooks. So we had the devices, we had the plan, we had the infrastructure of that laid in place to be able to send the devices home.
But still, I know there were school districts who struggled, even if they may have had some infrastructure in place. They didn't necessarily have a plan to get those things logistically delivered, right? And so
It's just it was daily problem solving is what it was. I mean, we would take that. We got it to the point where we figured out. We're talking to teachers. Like, if you remember, I would imagine Mr. Landry said, "Who have you not contacted with yet? Give your I think y'all were building a Google sheet of the kids that they had not logged on." So we're taking that list, and then we're getting on the phone and we're calling and we're finding out, why are you not online? And a lot of the time it was we don't have internet service. So yes, we took that on our own to call. Is it Cable Links here in town? A resort.
Yeah, resort.
And we made a deal with them, which they were able to get to probably about 94% of all the homes that we needed to get to. But we did have some kids who were school choice that, I remember there was one family that I was involved with going out to the house back and forth. And I mean, I took several things out there to try to get a signal, and it was very, very difficult. Spotty was, like, you couldn't Zoom or anything from where they were at with a hotspot. So we also had a few hotspots. We got a few more. We were really just piecing it together that we were trying to have a solution to get internet service to every household, and I think we got to 99% by the end of the school year.
It seems like there was this element of military efficiency in what you guys were doing, and the teamwork aspect matters. And so you've been building the team, so to speak, for several years, and so that preparation and working well together and the communication factor, I think that was good too. Yeah. But it was impressive to watch.
And
it all
our
come
media
together.
Specialists too, and they had teachers meeting in there, if y'all remember, training for Zoom, which we'd never heard of, and of course now that's just second language to us. They were training us on how to get signed up, and this was right before we left for spring break.
Yeah, so this is the day or two before.
And I didn't have a camera on my school laptop, so they're handing out cameras. Thank goodness we had them. Maybe somebody made a trip for that. I was just thinking, like, oh, okay, here's a USB camera for me, and so I can Zoom with my students. Like, I didn't even have that capability. Now, I had a computer at home, but it's just like there's 1 million decisions that have to be made, and And that just goes to show that the administrative, like when you said you met every morning at 7 through Zoom as an administrative team, are you talking about all the principals and assistant principals and the technology
directors,
team?
yeah.
I mean, that's a good group.
Yeah.
And just that
And-
efficiency.
but also to trust that those people are going to do what you've instructed and what you've decided as a team to do, and then they actually make that happen.
Right.
Because I think that, again, I've heard other stories from other districts, not necessarily in this county, but around the state, where they were like, yeah, well, we kind of, and they sort of limped along, and that really put their kids at a disadvantage. I don't think that we suffered that same sort of.
No, I believe that we navigated that March to May probably about as well as anybody in the state. And I mean, yes, I think our leadership team did great, but I mean, ultimately, all we did was try to get everything to the place where y'all could do your thing. You know, our people, our teachers, our staff made the difference.
But there's a lot of trust in that's what I'm saying.
Right.
Like you can make decisions and then you send that down the pipeline,
Yeah.
and then you trust that everybody's going to do their part. And I think, at least from our perspective, looking outwards, I think it went as well as it could, like you said.
I think it went as well as it could. I really do.
So, yeah, let's quit praising the administration and let's
Well, that's not. You're going to drop some. You're going to drop some viewership if you keep that up.
yeah, let's get to some critiques here. Now, I do want to talk to you a little bit about the summer process, and as a teacher, what we heard was going to be our reality here at the high school, literally in the PD right before school started, versus what happened in the couple first weeks of school. There was some of us thinking, oh, we're going to just be back for a week or two, and then it's going to break out everywhere, and we're going to shut back down for a month probably. There was teachers that's like, we shouldn't be at school at all. This is ridiculous. So there was so many groups that were just mad, about even coming back to school. And I understand from your perspective, I mean, that's a state call. The governor makes a lot of those decisions. And it seemed pretty clear as far as school being open or closed was going to be at the state level. But give me here's the question is, what were the expectations, and then what realities hit when school did start back? Kind of the...
Yeah. Okay.
Not just from the instruction standpoint, but just like
Everything.
Yeah.
What you thought?
And guys, let me tell you, it was a very long, short summer. I mean, it was a lot of things, and it seemed like summer just really went by. So, we got to the point where we said we've got to have a plan for next year. So now we're to the point of the story where, okay, well, this is a little more real than what we thought about. And then there's all that conversation that you're talking about. We shouldn't go back to school at all. We should. The state, pretty much, our state, Arkansas, came out and said we need to be in school. I 100% agreed with that. And I think you guys, after looking through the year, you see the importance of being here every day and being here for our kids. I'm extremely, and I still am to this point, I'm extremely worried about a lot of our kids and the different situations that they have, not only at home, but, academically, socio-emotionally. There's just a lot to be concerned about. I thought there was a big possibility that, from what I'd seen about how the virus spread, I was very concerned that we were going to be sent back home into a remote situation. I think a lot of people had that outlook. And again, you're basing everything off not a lot of information, just what you're just kind of piecing together, what you're seeing. So that was big in my mind, is that equity. I guess that's one thing we're looking at. And I've used this analogy a lot through the year. It seems like I had a balance, and on two ends, I was looking at safety and academics. And every time I felt like we'd make decisions that were good academically, that safety balance would bottom out because we were pulling off that pile. And then if we tried to do things that were safe for everybody, then that academic, scale went down. So we were really worried about, balancing those two with a touch of equity put in there. And one of the big things that I had concerns about going into it was if we did, one of the big, decisions, and I still hear this a lot, like at the high school, should we have a virtual teaching staff and should we have an on-site teaching staff? Well, my concern with that was, this is what I gave a lot of people this analogy, and I'll just use it right here. If I got Ron and Jeremy, and I'm trying to figure out, and Ron's going to be my virtual teacher, and Jeremy's going to be my on-site teacher. Okay, well, first, I didn't feel like that was real equitable to ask Jeremy to come to school because he's going to have a classroom full of kids and the type of kids that he had, because, he's probably got kids that don't have great internet or they don't have the home structure. That's probably why they're coming to school, because they need to be here. And then Ron has the kids that they have the parents, and I'm putting myself, my kids are virtual this year, so they have a home, they got plenty to eat, they have all those amenities. And then I was thinking, if we get sent home for a big stretch like we did in the spring, well, then Ron's got a pretty good deal compared to Jeremy, and it's going to be hard for Jeremy to reach all of those kids like he was. So that was a big thing, just the equity part of it. Now let me back up a little bit. At this point, so we're getting committees together, and we would have committee. We had an academic committee, we had a transportation, food service. We had a ton of committees going that we were trying to make some of these decisions. But that was some of the conversation that went in. It seemed like that was the most important thing. People were pretty much the cleaning. I think everybody was pretty on board, with all of that, and the mask wearing was a big discussion, because at the time, and if you'll remember, several districts put their plan out really early, and at first they were saying masks are going to be optional. Well, that one took a whooping, and and we were kind of slow to put that one out. And I'll be honest, we were from the beginning. We were thinking you're going to have to wear masks to come to school. All the way down. We've let off on like the kindergartners, the younger kids with masks at recess, because that kind of carried a different safety concern right there. But we've really tried to keep masks other places, except athletics, which I will say a lot of the things, if you really just want to pick it apart, you can look at it and say, well, how come you got to wear a mask here, but you can play basketball and you don't wear masks? So there's a lot to be kind of, picked apart in there. So kind of back to the deal, we looked at safety. We definitely believed we needed to be in school. We looked at the equity end of it. And we really just thought, with the uncertainty of what was coming and going, we thought that what we did this year, and I definitely we see the issues, and we're getting ready to make a suggestion, a proposal to the school board about how we're going to run school next year. And there's probably going to be some major differences. And one of the differences in our thought process now is, it's different. I think people know more about the virus, and there's a lot more knowledge now than there was back on the front end. And we knew that we were going to have parents who were going to sign up their kid for one and change their mind. And like that happened. In the lower grades, we've really got a lot more kids come back to school through the semester. Senior high, it might have actually been just the opposite for a while. I know in sports, I think sports was really driving the train on that. A lot of them wanted to go home because they didn't want to be quarantined for that. Last week, I thought it looked like there were more kids in the hall.
Today, it seemed like there were more kids in the hall
than I had seen. So we knew that people, depending on their situations, were going to want to come back and forth, which that again led to the system that we're in. Because if we would have had trying to trade kids between teachers as they were on site or at home, we didn't feel like that was going to be. We felt like it was going to be very difficult, and keep our standards. That was another thing that we had to go by, was the number of kids that could be in a class, teacher load, things like that. So again, trying to keep that as equitable and to try to let it kind of flow as much as possible. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That was our thought process.
Well, I know that when we came back, we had all had conversations about what we were going to try to do. We tried to get our heads together about what kind of approach are you going to take. Are you going to try to do this? Are you going to try to do that? How are you going to handle the kids on site? How are you going to have the kids? We didn't. Part of it was you didn't even know how many kids were going to be here day one or day 12 versus how many kids were going to be online, and how do you deliver content to all of those, considering the changing dynamics that you might experience. And I know that by day two, I had already realized that what I thought I was going to do wasn't really going to work, and we had to shift gears and try new things. And to go back to the praising just a little bit, I will say that every administrator that I talked to that said, I need this, they were like, cool, we will get that for you. I wasn't turned down for a single thing that I asked for. And we tried that, and if it didn't work, we tried something else. And then we came back and said, I need this. And so I'm glad that we had that kind of flexibility, and I think that we've worked something now better than what we started with.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise, and these two guys can talk to this, because I think one of the conversations we three had as teachers in the first weeks of school was the expectation before school was it's got to be equitable. It needs to be asynchronous, which means we can't require students to zoom in at first period just because it's first period. And so the impression I thought, and maybe we all kind of thought, is that we're not going to do a live teaching. We're not going to stand in front of the class and teach to the students that are there, because that wouldn't be, unless we record it, and then send it home. And then, of course, that's different too. And so, but what happened because of the message of it's got to be equitable. We had some teachers that didn't even talk to their kids that were in the classroom. And then you had these maniacs that, look, there's kids in the class, I got to teach them. I mean, you couldn't tie them down to save their life.
Rebels. You guys.
I got to teach them. They're looking at me.
Stepping out of the box
You think
there.
I'm kidding? By the end of day 2, I'm like, I have to teach kids.
Yeah.
Me too. But we got a little
did
bit
it.
of pushback for that too.
Right, but then that
then
leveled
praise.
back out.
Yeah.
And then they're like, thanks for teaching the
Yeah,
kids.
there
in the
was a moment where they're like, "What are y'all doing?" Well, it's because, but again, it smoothed back out after we
Right.
explained why we thought that was better.
Well-
Which is interesting because we'd already sort of proposed that during the summertime conversations, and it was kind of shot down. But again, part of my point is that you don't know what the situation is going to be until you actually step into that classroom setting.
Yeah,
You can make
you're
all
in
kinds
it.
of plans,
Yeah.
but then what's the reality when you actually flip that switch?
And some of
turn
this
in?
is so funny thinking back on like masks. Like we might not wear masks. Like that seems so ridiculous now. But I know Nixon, I think, and maybe both of y'all had a story about an administrator walking in
Yeah.
during the first week. Oh, okay. Was it him? I didn't know it was you
Was it
or
me?
somebody. And you were up teaching.
I was up teaching.
Yeah.
And it's
He
just
walks
like,
in,
Yeah, it was
"Hey,
you. I
we're
remember that
learning."
now. You open the door and you're like, "What you doing, Ron?" I'm like, "I'm teaching." You're like, "Cool," and you just close the door and walk out.
We were talking
Oh,
about
okay.
the walls of Jericho. Yeah. And I was like, come on in. And you came in, but I was like, oh,
Yeah, because at that point we were not.
And see, and
we hadn't actually had prior approval at that point to be doing the live teaching.
Yeah, we did
just sort
not.
of crossed that line ourselves
yeah,
and
you
hoped
probably
that we would be okay.
Yeah, for the high school administration, we felt like we were doing something wrong when we were standing up
yeah, I
teaching.
told Ron, I'm like, I got caught teaching.
Got called teaching.
I got caught teaching.
I didn't know where you're going with that. That's funny. Because I guess that's the
Hey,
first time I
did you?
ever.
You probably didn't notice the
No.
look on my face. Maybe
No,
I hit
I
it
know.
well, but I was like, "Doop."
Yeah, me too. Me too.
No, and to be honest, I was tickled to death that you were up teaching. And ultimately, I mean, on that one, I guess we've got to take blame for that, for leadership, central office, because we didn't communicate that well enough, because we did have some differences going on in the building. So that was something that we didn't communicate well enough. But that was always my intention, that we would be trying. And when I say equity, it's really just like, we're not going to do this for the on-site kids and then just give them.
Well, right.
Give
yeah,
them
yeah.
a what do you call the meal when you go to the used to, which the kids don't know about that anymore. You used to get the alternative meal if you didn't, if your parents didn't send you with lunch money. They'd give you
Glass
something
of water,
nobody wanted to.
crust of bread.
Yeah, and we didn't want. That's what we were talking about, but we evidently didn't communicate that well enough.
Well, but that's to be slightly critical, but then also slightly complimentary. There was miscommunication at the beginning of that story. However, it worked itself out, and there was the flexibility to allow that in each pod of teachers, wherever
Yeah.
it happened to be in history or math or wherever. Like everybody got into their groove, and we were allowed that flexibility. So even though there was that, I think that's part of the growing pains of what the experience was, though overall.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like
And we knew that we were, things were going to change a lot during the year. Actually, I guess the numbers kind of kept growing, but it was kind of a gradual. It really didn't change as much during the year, other than just that gradual uptick that maybe we had anticipated.
Were you surprised that the sporting activities did not cause more chaos?
I'm really, to be honest with you, I'm of the opinion, and we ran a set of numbers the other day with, we looked at all the kids we have quarantined since the beginning of school, and I mean we're doing what the health department's asked us to do. 6 feet, 15 minutes, I'll give a shout out to Nurse Kelly and the rest of our nurses on campus. They have been, I mean, because they sometimes guys, they spend all weekend on the phone. Because if you get 40 kids get quarantined, that's 40 conversations they have to have. And those aren't quick conversations.
At least, yeah.
Those aren't, hey, by the way, you and your family aren't going anywhere for 10 days. Just stay at home, see you later. And then it's like, well, wait a minute, tell me more about it. Well, I can't. There's HIPAA. I can't tell you why you're quarantined. I can just tell you are quarantined. You can't come to school. You can't participate in sports. Those are hard conversations. But we looked at the kids we've quarantined, and out of that number of quarantined, how many of them developed the virus while they were quarantined, right? Because that's why we quarantine people, is because we think you may have caught it, and we don't want you to be contagious. Of that group of people, it's like 1% that actually caught the virus. So, and I think if you've looked around, that's the message that's mainly being reported, is schools really have not been a big spreader of the virus. Sports have not been near the spreader that they had anticipated it. And I also believe, I was one, I will admit at first I thought that's kind of out there to be thinking we're going to have sports, and I was afraid summer sports was going to shut us down before we even started for school. And I knew how important it was we get back to school in August. But I've seen how important sports and extracurricular activities and really anything that reminds us of being normal has been to our well-being.
So do you think that based on those numbers and that sense of reality that's going to be part of the conversation you have about what next year is going to look like as far as bringing kids back then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's made an impact with me. I mean, as far as what role I see as school as a spreader. Another big thing that's big for me right now as far as changing some ways that we think about things is that the teachers, we've had one group have just received their second vaccination. We've got the next group, that took them here on campus. They will get that shot, I think next Thursday is the plan. And a few days after that, then I feel like everybody's had a chance to get a round of protection that we didn't have before. So I'm feeling a lot better about the safety of our staff. And guys, going back to this summer, the safety of our staff was probably the biggest thing. As we laid it all out on the table, you can imagine, like in my role, Mr. Cook, school board, the absolute worst thing that we were thinking of is something goes bad with a student. And I'll be honest, we didn't worry as much about students because I still don't know in Arkansas. There's been very, very few, if any. I mean, under 18
extreme cases. Yeah.
I mean, very, very extreme cases. The staff was probably our biggest, concern with that. And again, that's where it kind of went back to on, do we do two different staffs? Then I've got to ask some people to be here with full classes and pretty much say, you will not be able, I cannot distance you. You will have to be out there. So that was the plan with, not only the letting, mixing the classes in, the virtual, but also adding the hybrid to it. It was to dilute your classroom, of get your numbers down.
Do you think that our numbers have been low from the student population because we have had so many kids that were at home, though, as opposed to a full? I mean, if we'd had everybody in the building, I wonder how much. And it's speculative, I know,
right?
Because we can't throw statistics that we don't have. But I wonder, though, if that would have climbed, and if we'd have had more staff, not only quarantined but actually infected because of having a full student body on campus. And I'm sure that has to weigh into the decisions too.
Well, let me tell you, again, and we've learned a lot this year too. So there was, I guess maybe around 9 weeks to somewhere between the first and second 9 weeks, the building in the district that had the highest percentage of kids on site every day was the intermediate. They were at about 80%. And, it was really tough. A lot of, I will say that I think that we've had people, I know this is a shocker to you, we've had some people abuse the hybrid situation. I know.
I was unaware of that.
So they were really calling a lot of parents and getting kids back on campus. So intermediate's got the most percentage of the people on campus. When we pulled those numbers a few weeks ago, Guess what building had the highest percentage of cases and number of staff members who had the coronavirus? It was intermediate.
Yeah.
So, yes, I think there was now, was it to the degree that I would have thought originally? No. I mean, I still don't think school is
Higher
spreading
doesn't
it.
necessarily mean extreme.
Not extreme, but it was higher. They've got the most. I mean, really, I think more cases than, especially staff cases, more at the intermediate than even the high school, and that's almost double the staff.
How much impact do you think that the masking has made? How much impact do you think having masks on students and staff though has really calmed that down for the ones that are here? Because I mean, from what you hear from medical professionals, like that is one of the biggest difference makers you can have.
Yeah. I think that's one reason school has not been a big spreader, because even though it's not perfect by any far means, I mean, you see, we're telling people, pull your mask up, take it up.
It's way better than I thought, though.
It's way better than I thought, and it's way better than it is at most places. When you go, I mean, outside of education, so I think we've tried to follow those rules. We've tried to put more teeth in that than a lot of places you go.
Do you think that it's also true that by this point in the story that most everybody that either knows somebody who's been affected by this or has been affected by this?
I think that has a lot, and that still goes on today. Like one of our next steps is, we've asked the principals to talk to the guiding coalitions. Every building has a guiding coalition, and we're trying to get feedback from the staff about what do you think, would be the most effective approach to take going into next year. And I see that from talking with various staff members. When you talk to somebody who either has had somebody get really sick in their inner circle, or like I kind of get it's a different conversation with that person than it is with somebody who really hasn't had that close encounter with it. It's two different conversations. So yes, I think we're still dealing with that. It's just what has us, all of us individually, what has our experience been? And I think that's where you see with our kids. The kids are looking at their peers, and most of them are saying, well, we've all,
politics, of course, plays a part into all this too, because you can see what our state has done, and you can even see what school districts do as far as mask wearing and all that. And then there's some states that they haven't even had school yet. And there's this fine line, because we like to say in our safety-conscious society that safety first. Mike Rowe, the guy that used to host Dirty Jobs, he came out with the saying safety third. And what he meant by that was not that we shouldn't care about safety, but you do have to balance. Like if safety was our first priority, we'd all just stay at home. You wouldn't even get in your car because you're taking a chance on the road. We have to balance, dangerous things with society, with, driving your car down the road or coming to school to learn. And, we talked about equity. And I think something we realized early on is we're going to be as equitable as we can, but there's still a difference between being here and sleeping until noon and maybe doing a little work at night at your house. And I think all three of us can attest to the kids that are here are getting maybe not as much as some kids at home, but they're getting more than they would if they were at home. And can you talk just for a second about how you deal with the politics? Because this is kind of a political podcast to some degree. Have you felt the political pressure from either side more? I mean, do you think that our school responded a certain way because of the politics surrounding this area, or did you find that at all with the political pressure?
I personally don't feel like politics played a role in any of my decision making. I'm not an overly I don't know if that comes out right or wrong. I'm not overly political on stuff like that. I mean, when it comes to school, it's about what I feel like is best for the kids first and foremost, and then what is best for our staff. And I will say, a lot of our plan moving in, we put staff health was very, very high on the list. And when you were talking about safety third, we moved that up. We moved that up some. I mean, and it's like, we know that some of these things we didn't think was the best academic, but the safety was so, like, it just wasn't worth the risk, on that end of it. So, and also when you said equity, we know that there's no if you're at home, you're just not getting the same experience.
No offense to Mike Rowe, but I think you can have safety on the same level with other things.
Well,
It
yeah,
doesn't have to notch down.
Yeah,
Just
but I
bring
heard
something
that
else up with
slogan
it.
in it because we say safety first. But
No, I
you know
get
what I
you're
mean?
saying. Yeah.
And I also want, we don't have a whole lot. I'm starting to become more aware of your time. But is there any predictions that you can make in regards to the long-term consequences you think that this moment in history of this virus, how it's going to change education, maybe, or change school rules or laws? Do you have any inkling of how some long-term effects of this?
Yeah, and that's one thing I've made this statement several times too. Some of these things that are going on now, it's going to be hard to put the genie back in the bottle. Maybe some of them for the good. I mean, some of the good that's, I think, come out of, I had a student interview me the other day and want to know how the coronavirus has positively impacted education. And at first I was like, man, that's crazy talk right there, but then I really had to think, and I mean, parents and our communication with parents has probably been better across the board. I'm talking about K-12. We've probably done more home visits on students this semester than we have, or this year than we have all my previous 15 years, before this. I think we're seeing that there's some things that where technology can help and bridge the gap. One thing for like the high school kids that I've always, a problem I've always seen is starting school at 8:00 and high school kids having to get up at 6. That doesn't really work. I mean, if you look at the science behind that, they need more sleep. So I can maybe see a future where a kid does have a couple of online classes where they don't have to be at school at 8:00. They don't have to get up at 6. I sure hope that we get back, a mixture of what worked and what didn't work. And that's what we're really trying to do right now. We're trying to get numbers, stats of what worked, who are the kids that it worked for, and then when we look in the future, options we're going to give our students, a lot of it's going to be based off your past performance. So I do think we're probably going to have to look at a virtual option next year. I would like to get your opinion before we leave here about what you think that could look like. But one thing that we've really talked about is more of an application process for some of those extras if it's a virtual, and like were you virtual last year? How did you do? Were you successful? More parent contracts, more of a understanding from parents their role that they play in the deal, because if you're keeping your kid at home, you are taking on a much bigger role as a parent. It is kind of homeschooling in a way. You're involved. So we're looking at some outlines. I'm definitely seeing kind of a common theme from a lot of the school districts in Arkansas as I'm talking. I mean, it sounds like everybody's plan is kind of coming together very similar, because I think we all had very similar experiences throughout the year.
Are districts worried about staff turnover because of potential burnout from some of the things that have happened this year?
That's a concern. Interestingly enough,
are there any indications that will be a
It's
reality?
actually the numbers point to just the opposite.
Really?
Because,
Okay.
and I think, and you guys can probably talk more than this, when there's times of, any times where, like economic uncertainty is in play, people are really hesitant to switch jobs, switch careers, change like that. And if you've got a very good, solid situation as far as employment.
Especially when you start seeing food lines around the country.
Right.
I have
statistically,
job security, and I'm glad about that.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, unless you're directly impacted, by whatever economic phenomenon's going on. Statistically, people stay put, and then if they are directly affected economically, then they start looking for other opportunities. So you see increased enrollment in like technical schools, trade schools, or just going back to college. So yeah, I could definitely see that, because from the economics perspective, is people stay put. Is the easy way to put it.
What about older veteran teachers that may be considering retiring because of the changes that have happened this year?
I think that's a reality. Because we have a great retirement system here in Arkansas, and really when you're vested, fully vested, it is a great situation. You can take advantage of that, and so I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see some people retire. What level of that? I'm not 100% sure. There was an article that came out right after the summer, because there was a lot of people even that point saying, I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to do it. And it was actually the lowest teacher turnover in something like 20 years or something. It was just opposite of what you had kind of
That's
heard.
impressive in a moment like this.
Right.
You might expect the opposite.
And
I'm going to sign my contract, by the way. I wasn't hinting at anything
got something
there.
to tell you.
Which there's a lot of reasons why I love this profession. I mean, you guys have been around me enough. You know that I mean, we all work. We all have to have a paycheck to take care of things. But I love this profession. But it is the security of it too. And when I saw, in my job, I talked to so many parents that that have had some really hard deals. Talked to some kids that a lot of our kids this year, they're working during the day to help make ends meet. It's heartbreaking to listen to some of the stories.
Is that going to be a factor next year too, especially for our older students, where you might say, look, here we can change up the day because I know this was a thing in the past, where you've got your credits and you may have this flexibility in your schedule, so maybe you do need to go work and we can give you that time to cut out of here. Is that something that's on the horizon, or is it even part of the conversation?
We haven't got that far yet. I think we've got to talk about our base structure of what it's going to look like. And
but you guys have preached flexibility all year long, and
Right.
I wonder if.
And we already have virtual
does that
kids
entail?
this year. We have virtual kids this year that have taken
Who are-
jobs.
yeah,
who are
yeah,
working
right.
doing,
Sure.
so that might be a reality.
For better or worse, academically.
right.
Well, and one thing we talked about, because we just had our guiding coalition meeting this morning, about what next year would look like, and we were kind of asked what our concerns were. And I don't know what you guys, because I haven't been able to talk with you guys yet, but I mean, the concerns that I voiced were the AP level students being here versus at home, and then looking at what Mr. Ward was talking about just a minute ago, seeing if they were successful, and looking at the data. How do you measure that? Because I mean, Ron and I have had this conversation a lot lately, because we aren't able to tell if some people are successful because they are, especially online, getting the content, or it's because they are good at using the internet. And that's worrying me, honestly.
Yeah, my saying that I've said all year is you could have an A in my class and know the least right now, or you can have an F and know the most. I don't know, because we don't have testing security. I don't really know what you're doing outside of here. And a lot of my class was based on debates and discussion and listening to students talk to me about what
too.
they know. Here, I probably have 20-25% of my students here, and it's kind of interesting. Our grandparents always, we had to walk to school, and my generation's like we had standardized testing. This generation may be like telling their kids, well, I had compulsory attendance up until 11th grade.
Yeah.
So it's changed. This might change a whole lot of outlooks on things.
I do think that, when you asked a while ago about big changes, that's one of them. About I think I've already seen the state talking about not looking at seat time as much as like in days, but a certain, like, where you could, I guess theoretically you could go longer some days and shorter other days. That's kind of, we really haven't got too deep into what that could actually mean, but it is moving away from it. One time seat time was so important. You had to have your rear end in the seat for a certain number of hours if you were going to be educated. And I do think that's changing.
Can you speak to any conversations happening at the state level, because in regards to students who may leave this traditional building and go and seek a GED because of whatever situation they're facing at home, and it might work out better for them, but yet the school districts themselves are being punished as far as the way the state records the way they grade the schools on their
Dropout
level
rate.
of excellence.
Graduation rate.
Right, the graduation rates. Is there any conversations with anybody at the highest levels in the state where they're saying we need to look at that, because if we're saying that this is an equivalency degree, and yet they're being counted as dropouts from the high school. Like that doesn't make sense. Are there any conversations about that? Because I wonder now. But you talked about a lot of seniors have gone off to get jobs. A lot of the juniors too. They might decide that this is not what they want to continue to do, and they might then go off and seek a GED. What are we still going to continue to be downgraded because of their decision, even though they'll end up with an equivalency degree? You see what I'm asking?
I see
I'm
what you're
going around
asking.
and around with it. I'm not sure if you can address that or not. But
well, it's funny, that let's think about that from the state level. They're saying, you've got this GED, this equivalency degree, but yet if you get that, we're gonna mark the school down. You're penalized. So are they really saying it's an equivalency degree? And is it really? You pass a test, and then you get the degree. I don't know that I see that changing a whole lot.
The reason I'm asking that is because I know that so many districts across the state, and I'm going to assume across the nation, are going to be facing dismal graduation rates this year.
Well, not only that, but just drop in enrollment.
Right.
So here's this just big anomaly. All schools, almost every school I know has dropped kids. Where did they go?
Right.
That's embarrassing for me to say that, but nobody knows really. And that kind of happens through, pre-COVID, where, you may start with a class coming through of ninth graders that are 260, and then by the time it gets to the end, it's normally 220 or so. And almost everybody reports that. So they're leaving, they're going places. And I think we do a pretty good job of tracking our kids that leave, but still some of them, when they don't show back up and you don't know where to find them, it's difficult. Well, all schools right now are facing decreases in enrollment. Well, that directly affects the funding that we get.
Right.
So, I know right now, I think there's a bill in place. I think they call it the no harm provision. Have y'all seen that? Where they're basically just, the superintendents have asked, don't cut our funding this year based on this, because that affects, if we have to do that affects making job cuts and things like that. So they were basically just saying, can you freeze our pay at where it was before COVID until this thing kind of shakes out?
But don't lower graduation rates also increase the likelihood that the state will step in and have some sort of, you're going to be on an improvement plan now as a district? Is that,
Yeah. In the past it would. I think they're going to be very, very slow to, the State Department, in my opinion, has been really good through this whole deal. They've said, listen, this is a bad deal.
There's going to come a point in time where people go, all right, here's the new deal, and I just hope that that's going to be based on some sort of sense of reality rather than what they want it to be.
Right.
I think also psychologically there's going to be some stuff come out about the importance of kids socializing at school. And our school system in America is such a big part of these kids' lives with sports and everything. Some of these kids wake up early and all the friends they have are right here. And we've already seen this with mental health and suicide rates and all that. I think when some of that content comes out and we get some real hard figures about how kids staying at home all day, and it might kind of go back the other way a little bit. We need to make sure that kids are at school, at least in certain ages.
That's what we're working on right now, is really to try to get better data to share with our parents, our community, our staff. It looks like to me, just looking at it before we actually put it together, I think the research, the data that we have so far really points to coming to school matters.
I'm concerned, and I'm curious if you are too, about a ripple effect in years to come. For if we've had this, what over, and this goes back to what you were asking a while ago, Kevin, about what's next year going to look like and afterwards. Like if there is this group of kids that goes all the way back to kindergarten now, who have struggled this year in particular because of mental health issues, or because of the social distancing things, or because they were, and I don't just mean here at this school, I mean talking about nationwide.
Yeah,
it's
places where they didn't open the doors.
Even if we come right back and we're able to come back 100% next year, there's going to be this. There's going to be an adjustment, and I wonder how long it's going to take to work that back out so that we can bring ourselves really back up to full speed.
Yeah.
It's like the caution flags are out on a raceway.
It's really bad. You know, they've, I don't know if y'all, there's been some studies that they showed about like kids that went through Hurricane Katrina, other places like this where kids were basically had a very lengthy, a year or close to a year loss of instruction and,
or at least to the same degree they'd had before.
right.
Right.
And, it's eye opening. It's a big gap. It's very difficult to close. So that again is why I'm really proud that we were able to keep our doors open, you know, through. And again, I'm saying that, and I know we're about to go home for weather for a couple of days. I was really hoping we could say, you know, had the doors open 178 this year, but I'm proud. I really think we have been able to do our kids for the most part justice. You know, you're talking about the lower grades. You know, school really has looked very, very similar to how it always has in the lower grades. I mean, they've really done a good job. Those kids are you know, I have you guys have had my senior, and I got a kindergarten on the other end, and really, you know, but he doesn't even hardly know any different right now. You know, you wear masks sometimes he doesn't. You know, he's
Right.
pull it up. He's pretty much having a kindergarten experience, gets to go out and play, and his handwriting's unbelievable with the program we're using now. He's got better handwriting than I do. Our kids are learning. They really are. The ones that are on site for the most part. Some are doing really well at home. You know, right now it definitely looks like the group that is probably struggling the worst is the hybrid kids, because it's just there's no, you know, kids need a constant, they need a stable, and the ones that are not coming frequently, regularly, when it's not a set pattern, which is what we asked from the get-go, but the ones that weren't able to do that, it looks like there's a clear pattern right now that those kids are the ones that are probably struggling the most, and that's one that we're really, you know, not looking to try to keep that one going.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say, as we wrap up here, thank you for coming on, and thanks to the whole administrative team. I think this school responded as well as any school district. I've always loved teaching here. I know these guys have as well, and it's just a testament to the leadership, because, as you know, it takes everybody pulling the same direction to get this thing moving, and I think the appropriate adjustments will be made. And everybody has been pretty flexible in this scenario. So thank you so much for coming on.
It was my pleasure.
And so that's History After Hours. We will see you next time.